Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl preview with Nick Meanahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called The Shared Dream, and it's from Odom Publishing. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page, and you only have a couple of days left before the campaign ends. There will be a link up in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. Those links will take you to the page. You can find out more information than I could possibly tell you here, and hopefully consider backing the project. Now, The Shared Dream is a fully cooperative game where you and the other players take control of these anima, which are basically magic users who can control their dreams. But at times, though, they are beset by nightmares, which unfortunately come to life into the real world, and then they have to use their special powers to deal with them and to save themselves and other people. And the game is scenario driven, so there's different scenarios that come with the game, and which has a variable setup, variable goals, different types of creatures and encounters that you'll have, and characters as well that might help you during the course of the game. And every player has not only their own real world form, but a special dream form that they can transform into. So that all sounds a bit much, but let me go ahead and break it down for you into simpler terms with a preview copy of the game. So what you see in this overview is going to be a little bit different than what the final version will look like, of course, just keep that in mind. Then we're going to come back, we'll give you my final thoughts.
The Shared Dream is a cooperative game for 2 to 4 players. Each player is an anima, a powerful magic user who can bring their dreams to life. Each player shared the same nightmare and awoke to discover that these nightmares came to life and are terrorizing the real world. The goal of the game is for the players to work together to destroy the nightmare creatures and save the waking world. At the start of the game, you'll need to choose a scenario. This scenario will determine what the exact details of your goal are. For example, in this scenario, Beast at the Door, you and the other players must find dream fragments to force a nightmare beast to take physical form, and then kill it. The scenario card will also tell you which location tiles you are required to use. Together with a number of street tiles dependent on the number of players, you'll shuffle them up and make the map, making sure that every location is accessible. Some of these locations will start with taint cubes, which I'll explain later. Several decks of cards unique to the scenario are laid out, including dream fragments, beast strikes cards, and a card for the beast itself. Several other decks are used with every scenario, including artifacts, echoes, dark magic, and the enemies of the game, the Reavers. There are several other basic components as well, including dice, tokens, dials for the enemies, and miniatures, though in this preview copy they are only pawns. This leaves us with the players. Each player gets an animus sheet, which is your real-world form, along with enough tokens to cover up your conviction, nightmare, and doubt slots, but don't do that yet. You also get a player piece that gets placed out on one of the locations, according to what the start card of your reflection deck says. These cards are also unique to the scenario, and each deck is different with its own unique part of the story. Everyone gets a random deck and then reads the start card, which is always placed on top. Completing your reflection deck will get you the dream fragment you need to defeat the beast. The other major part of your player components is the anima sheet, and its accompanying miniature. This is your dream form, and we'll get to that a bit later. Every round of the game is broken into 2 phases: day, when the players act, and night, when the enemies act. First, I'll mention that many actions in this game require a test based on one of your 4 stats: combat, magic, social, and movement. Roll a blue die and a red die. The blue is positive and the red is negative. Roll them both, add them together, and then add your relevant stat. If you meet or beat the number requested, you pass the test. You need to follow a specific sequence of events every round. First, during the day, if you previously transformed into your animus, you now revert back to normal, replacing your miniature with your anima pawn and removing all conviction and animus cards from play. More on this later. Next, each player will draw an echo card, except on the first turn. These determine how well or how poorly your character's dreams went the previous night, and could increase or decrease your stats or get you artifacts. Next, each player raises both their nightmare and conviction levels, and then everyone decides what order they'll be acting in. Starting with the chosen first player, each player in order will take 3 actions. You have several options for these actions. You can move along streets up to your movement scores, following green arrows and ending your movement action on stop signs. You can rest, either gaining another conviction or losing one nightmare. You can draw an artifact by spending one conviction, though you can never have more than 2 artifacts at a time. These give you powerful stat boosts and special effects. You can choose to reflect. After drawing the start card of your reflection deck, each subsequent card will have another location depicted on the back. If you're at the corresponding location of the next card, you can draw it and resolve the storyline effect on it. You can spend from 1 to 3 conviction to channel your Animus, a powerful form that makes your stats go up. The amount of conviction you spend determines the passive ability rank you get to use, as well as the level of Animus cards you get to use. You'll replace your Anima pawn with your Animus miniature. Finally, you can attack as an action. This is simply a combat test against the combat score of your opponent, and defending works the same way if they attack you. Meeting or beating your opponent's score will deal damage or prevent you from getting hurt. The night phase has 4 parts. First, Enemies Act. Enemies can only move once, then attack once, as I just described. Your character can only take an amount of damage equal to your health. Every time that it does, it heals up, but it also takes a doubt token. 3 doubt tokens will eliminate you from the game. Next is Taint. Every location on the scenario card that started off with Taint gets another Taint token. If it's already full, instead it gets a Shadow Dial, which represents a monster with variable health and combat score. Spawning this reduces the Taint by 1. Next is Testing Nightmare. Every player rolls a 6-sided die, and if the result is equal to or lower than your Nightmare status, an enemy Shadow Dial spawns. The dial's numbers are set to whatever the failing player's Nightmare score is. If the Shadow scores gets to R, it's replaced with a powerful Reaver from the Reaver deck instead. Lastly, for the night phase is Scenario Actions. Refer to the main card. For example, this scenario dictates that you must draw a Beast Strike card and resolve it. The game continues in these phases until the end game condition is met, which in this case involves the players gathering the dream fragments and killing the Nightmare Beast. That is the shared dream.
Now, first off, I do want to stress, of course, that the preview copy of the game isn't going to look anywhere near as nice as the final version of the game is going to look with all the fancy miniatures and things like that. However, I think it gives you a good indication of what the theme of the game is and how it's going to ultimately play out. And I think what's the most interesting about the shared dream is that, of course, there are tons of games that are scenario-driven, tile-built miniatures games and cooperative as well, but they took those elements for the shared dream and really mixed them up with so many other unique elements, like the idea that you can transform into your dream form, the idea that you are compelled throughout the game by your reflection deck, which is a very interesting thing because it's not only adding thematic, story-driven elements to the game, it's also giving you drive and purpose. You're not just wandering around aimlessly grinding through monsters, but of course monsters do appear and you have to deal with them, and how that happens is interesting as well. Again, it all ties back to the theme. You are this dream warrior, the Anima, who has to, at times, use your Animus in order to fight the monsters that you yourself, unfortunately, are summoning into the world because you cannot control your nightmares at times. Well, but you can. You can mitigate it if you really spend the effort to do so. But eventually you and the other players are going to be beset by these things. The shadows may transform into the powerful Reavers, and then you have to deal with it. And of course you have your main goal, in the case of the one I just showed you, the main boss monster. But the scenarios are very, very different. I didn't have time to show you one of the other ones that came with it that can really change things up. And I think that is also key to this game, is that even though the world itself and the characters that you have are so varied and different, and all the characters have different stats and different special abilities and things like that, but even though they're very different, on top of that, you also have the very different scenarios. So no two games are really going to be the same, especially if you play with varying amounts of players, because every game is going to have different storylines for each of the characters. The characters can swap between the storylines from game to game with the reflection decks and so on. And there's just so much going on in the game, and yet it's really not an overly complicated game, which is very important. It's not difficult to learn, and it's not difficult to play, which is not I can't say that for every game that's similar in this genre of the cooperative map building games with miniatures. A lot of those games are really, really rules intensive and just overly complicated. Not so with the Shared Dream, and yet there is enough, I think, strategy and complication there to make it interesting for more experienced gamers. So when you add together the very unique theme with the interesting gameplay elements and all the different things going on in the game, the artwork, the miniatures, and so on and so forth, it's definitely unique is the word I keep going back to, because it's really like nothing else out on the market right now. Now, if any of those things appeal to you, or you know someone who it would appeal to, don't wait. You have to go to the Kickstarter page because there's only a few days left. There may be a chance for you to get a late pledge later, but I can't guarantee that. So you should go to the page now and make up your mind. Find out more information than I could possibly tell you here. There's going to be a link in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. Those links will take you there, and hopefully you'll consider backing the project. That is The Shared Dream from Odom Publishing. Thank you so much for watching and for supporting our sponsors. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.